Hello everyone and welcome to the Aujourd'hui Psychology podcast, the podcast where travel meets psychology. My name is Pamela and you guessed it, I'm a psychologist with a passion for travel. In Aujourd'hui Psychology, we meet travelers and psychologists who share their adventure stories through concepts of psychology. I think it's fair to say that I live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. New Zealand has it all. Sandy beaches, subtropical forest, sand dunes, plains, hills, mountains, volcanoes, glaciers, sounds, fjords, you name it. With every new adventure, I try to connect with nature a bit more. You see, spending time in nature has many benefits. It helps you feel relaxed, more grounded, more mindful. When you're in nature, all your senses are involved, which helps you reconnect with the present moment. Nature also helps you regulate your emotions and promotes creativity. It helps with stress, depressive episodes, and even attention issues. Plus, nature has this spiritual aspect to it. It makes us feel grateful, and it makes us feel as we are part of something bigger. Nature transcends us. In today's episode, we meet Camille in New Zealand. Camille is a counselor, and her love for nature led her to start her own private practice, Elevate Counseling, which involves both walking and talking. I hope that you enjoy our conversation and that it makes you want to take a little walk outside and enjoy the beautiful world that surrounds us. If you want to contact Camille, you can find her website at elevatecounseling.nz and her Instagram at elevatecounselingnz. So, are you guys ready? Let's hit the road. Hello, Camille.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here with me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I just want to start and see if you could introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, sure. So my name's Camille. I am from Nelson in New Zealand, and I currently live here too. I've been away and come back, and I'm married to a Frenchman. We got married in May this year, and I work as a counsellor.
As a counsellor, nice, thank you. So can you explain what that is exactly?
Yeah, so I did a Bachelor of Counselling degree, and I work for Women's Support Link in Motueka.
Yeah.
And then I also have a private business called Elevate Counseling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how long have you been a counsellor for?
I think a couple of years now. I think we graduated a couple of years ago. Yeah. Yes.
And what drew you to this field of counselling?
That's a good question. It's a bit of a story. So basically I left Nelson and I started off working. I studied graphic design.
Okay.
And I worked for a couple of years in Wellington, and that took me to traveling to Canada and then living there for a year and doing some traveling around Europe and then coming back, living in Nelson again and then moving to Melbourne.
Oh.
And in that time in Melbourne, I guess I was trying to reignite this graphic design career that I'd started, and I just couldn't connect with it.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. I felt really lost, and I got this job working in an online phone store.
Okay.
So buying secondhand phones, selling them, and it actually, it's quite a story with that, but there's a girl that was working under me who actually stole a lot of phones. And as I was the manager and she used my name to delete them from the system, I was put on trial basically. Wow. And it led to me resigning from that job. And then I was faced with, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So I started this nutrition degree in Australia. And in the meantime, I was dating an Italian. So we went to Italy and came back. And I had no money because I was now studying, and I couldn't get a student loan living in Australia being a Kiwi. My partner, my boyfriend at the time, the Italian, he was diagnosed with bipolar. Okay, and so then I went through this massive journey of discovering, because I didn't know anything about mental health. I didn't know what that meant. And me and his friends, we ended up having to put him into a psychiatric ward. And for me to see the transition of someone going into a manic episode was so powerful. Like, I never knew the brain could alter that way.
Yeah.
And then through all of that, we broke up and I came back to Nelson. And I was, again, really lost. So I'm now in my late 20s by this stage. And this is turning into be quite a story.
No, that's okay.
So I remember this moment after I'd come home. So I'm back in my hometown and I'm sitting outside my bedroom of my childhood bedroom, and I'm just crying like I've lost any kind of career that I had. I lost my relationship, also got into a lot of debt because he kind of got us into a lot of debt, plus our trip to Italy didn't help. And I was so lost, and Dad came down and sat with me and just allowed me that space to really cry it out and really figure out, what I was going to do from here. And chatting to Mum, actually, she said, "Why don't you try counselling? Because you've always been interested in it." I was interested in psychology. So then I went through studying all the different places around New Zealand, and in the end just chose Nelson. I can stay in Nelson. Yeah. So that's what led me.
Okay, yeah. That must have been quite tough, actually, to go from the high of doing something you enjoy and traveling the world with that, and then the meaningless, that kind of the sense of you kind of lost meaning after a while, right? That's what I got from what you said was your first job, and then you found something again, and then you lost that again. Yeah. So it's like lots of ups and downs. Yeah. So that must have been tough, but then you also found like resources in your parents. They were there for you. So.
Yeah. And I remember when I was studying nutrition, I did 6 months of that. I remember before that I had researched and contacted a lot of nutritionists and dietitians. And a lot of them had said, like, I remember this specifically, this one dietitian saying, "I work with women in the hospital with anorexia, and I'm working with their diet, but I'm not working with what got them there, what's behind it, what's led to this." And that really spoke to me. Like, they really wanted to get deeper, and I think that's what led me to realizing that nutrition is great, but I wanted to get deeper. Yeah. So
it's kind of all connected the way you get there as well, both personally and then through your own journey of finding a career. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So we're gonna start talking about your own private practice, Elevate Counseling.
Yeah.
So how did you come to start this?
I always knew when I was studying that I would start a private practice on the side.
Yeah.
Whether it's successful or not, I just knew I wanted to get it out there and begin.
Yeah.
And from there I can grow. And so that's actually lockdown last year when we were in lockdown. Yeah. Me and my husband worked on it and worked on the logo and worked on the design and created a website and put it out there. Yeah.
So it's kind of like you trusted yourself in a way.
Yeah.
I admire that because I've graduated in 2018 and here I am only starting now. So I admire that.
I don't know whether I completely trusted myself.
Yeah, or you trust the process at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's good. I like it. I admire it. And so what do you do as Elevate Counseling? Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, so it started off with, it is currently at the moment, with 2 different services. And one is a walk and talk and one is online therapy.
Yeah.
And so I've always loved nature and the outdoors. I grew up with, our dad taking us camping and going up mountains and eeling when we were little, walking through the creek at night and just going on adventures. And so I guess in my teens that got pushed aside. And when I lived in cities, I didn't connect with that part of myself very much. And coming back to Nelson, it's really reignited again. And I see how much nature means to me and how much being in nature.
Yeah.
Adventure therapy is kind of part of that for me, like being in a situation in the outdoors that is actually can be quite stressful in a way, and how to deal with that and how to breathe through it and deal with the anxiety and bringing that moment and those learnings into everyday life. Yeah. So I guess this walk and talk is we're walking in nature, we're using nature as a tool for the therapy. Yeah.
And I really like that because, research does show that nature has a lot of benefits for us, whether it's awe, like feeling, awe, gratitude, all the things. So I think it's nice, especially since you live in such a beautiful part of New Zealand. It's may as well, enjoy it. And so I think it's really nice. And then you talked a little bit about adventure as well. So is it something you try to implement in your practice as well, or it's just for your own?
At the moment, it's for my own, and as a goal later on, it will be something, because during lockdown last year, we also created another business that we've been working on for quite a few years, called Camille in Aotearoa. And so where my husband and I met was working in a kanganing company. And so that would be the ideal goal for us, is to combine the adventure and the therapy and run some kind of groups or couples therapy using adventure, using nature as a tool for the therapy.
It's quite innovative, I think. And it reminds me, I was listening to a psychologist talk about meeting someone and falling in love not too long ago, and they were talking about noradrenaline, and then about oxytocin, and about like all these different hormones and receptors that we feel in the brain when we fall in love, and it's the same ones at first as a stressful situation. So when you talk about adventure with couples and stuff like that, I feel like that's somehow related as well. So I think that'd be quite cool, actually.
Like seeing how your partner reacts in these situations, seeing how you reacting together, going through an experience together, bringing that out afterwards and being able to talk about it and debrief it and learn from it and grow from it.
And even emotion-wise, our brain tricks us into thinking that we're stressed not because of the challenge in front of us, but because of the love we feel for the person. So I had read studies about the fact that challenges make us feel closer to someone else, because our brain tricks us into thinking that's because of our feelings towards this person rather than the actual stress of the situation. So it's kind of like closing the loop altogether. So that's quite nice. And so what is the idea behind nature therapy? Because I know it's something that you've put in place, right? But and so for you, what is nature therapy?
I guess it is getting away from, urban life, getting away from the stresses, away from the routine of life, basically, and stripping it all back and being in nature and using nature as a tool and forming a connection with nature. Finding your own connection. What does it mean? The sounds. I think being in nature, it can be really mindful. It's a really good place for mindfulness. You've got all the sounds, you've got all the smells, all the beautiful sights. It's a place where you can just be in that moment and you're not worrying about all the other stresses of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even here in New Zealand, I've noticed a lot of people are barefoot. So, because you talk about hearing and smelling and seeing, but I feel like sometimes, because I'm not too good at being barefoot, but when I do, I feel a bit more grounded as well, which helps with mindfulness. So I can definitely see all the senses at work when I think about it in nature. Nice. And so for you, what are the advantages of working in nature?
I think the advantages are it can be quite hard sometimes to be in a room and to be sitting face to face with someone. And a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. And that's where traditionally therapy exists. Mm-hmm. And being able to take that outside and have distractions, have other connections. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a way, it kind of takes away the stigma of therapy as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like people don't feel as, like you said, the typical picture of being in a room. And yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And what about the disadvantages?
Disadvantages. So there is a bit to be mindful of too, like the sunlight hours as well. Yeah. You know, you've got to time your walk and talk so that it's not getting dark. And if it is getting dark, are you prepared with head torches? And like, is the client okay with that? Checking in that that's okay. Things like being aware, like if you're going to walk on the beach, tides, maybe you have to cross somewhere where there's an estuary and you turn up and the tide's in and I haven't planned for this, or planning your route, knowing how long the route is that you're walking. Confidentiality, meeting people, seeing someone you know, seeing someone they know. All of that. Yeah. So
how do you, if I can ask, how do you deal with these challenges of, because the setup, the tides and everything, it's something you can control, but challenges that you can't. For example, let's say it starts raining, or like you say, you see someone that either you know or that the person knows. Do you have your own way of dealing with them, or?
I guess firstly with the weather, I am checking the weather a lot, right up to the last point. And I'm preparing the client for the weather so they know if it's going to rain. I have done one in the rain before. We both wore raincoats. And it was something beautiful about walking in the rain. Yeah. The tides, knowing my route, knowing actually where I am going to walk. And often I give the client the choice of where they most feel comfortable, whether it's the bush, whether it's the beach. Yeah. In terms of meeting someone, there's times when we've passed people coming towards us, and I have to slow the chat down and almost become silent as the people pass, giving the client that space. I haven't actually come across anyone that I know, and I haven't had the client come across anyone that they know. And I guess in that moment, I would treat the client as a friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is that something you kind of set up before meeting the client? So if this happens, I
would say this is a possibility, and this is how I'd ask them, how would you like to react to this? Yeah. What would you like to happen? And I'd say what I'm prepared to do. Yeah.
I feel like that creates a safe space in a way. And I feel like when a client sees this open communication of, this person actually thought about this and this is how we're going to do it, it kind of, you're not surprised so much anymore if it happens, and you don't feel as stressed.
Yeah. We've made a plan. It's like a safety plan for the session. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And you were talking about sunlight, and so a quick question that came to my mind is that, do you feel like there is a time during the day that's a bit more powerful? Because you talked about the rain, but then what about sunlight?
I think as the sun is going down, those golden hours, that golden hour just before when watching the sunset, it's really powerful and magical. I mean, life is so busy, and how often do we sit and watch the sun go down? I've had a therapy session. We're not walking, we're sitting on the beach, but the whole therapy session we were just watching the sun go down. Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been quite intense in a way. Because I feel like in those silence, there's a lot of things. Within a silence, a lot of things can be said.
Yeah. A lot of feelings, a lot of emotions that aren't said. Yeah.
And then, as you said, was the mindfulness aspect as well. It's a good way to not settle, but be in touch.
Really grounded. Yeah.
No, definitely. And so in your practice with Elevate Counseling, what kind of people do you usually come across? Like, what kind of people do you work with, or if you have a typical client?
At this stage, it's been predominantly anxiety and depression. Yeah. I have a real passion for couples counselling, couples therapy. So at some stage, I'm going to move into this area.
Yeah.
That's my passion. Yeah.
What do you like about that?
I think for me, there is so much going on in a relationship.
Yeah.
You've got two different people. And as the counsellor, your client is actually the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the times, when you're working with a couple, especially if they have children or, it's kind of getting right back to the groundwork. If the parents are being able to communicate and have a healthy relationship, then the children are going to benefit. I think I have a real passion. I love reading about communication. I see it as such a foundation for the relationship and learning how to communicate together. Yeah.
And the thing is that there's so many things you can communicate about as well. Like just not only languages, but also body languages or showing affection, showing love and all those things. So I feel like communication takes all of this in a way.
Yeah. Communicating everything to each other. Yeah. Exactly.
And then if I can ask a personal question, because then I can kind of reflect with me as well.
Yeah.
But being with someone who's from such a different culture, because that's the case for me as well, I feel like you realize a bit more than a relationship is really about two different people. Because when you with someone from the same culture, sometimes you might take things for granted because you're from the same background. And so do you think that your own relationship has affected the way that you see working with couple?
I think both. I think I've learned a lot in my degree about communication and within my counselling that I've brought into the relationship. And I've learned a lot within the relationship that I've brought into my counselling.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a circle. I'm currently learning French. And within that, I thought I was just learning a language. I'm not. I'm learning a culture. I'm learning so much about my husband and why he says the things he is and the way he says things. I'm learning all of these things that, we at the beginning, there were some clashes. There were he might be really direct and I would be offended by that. And now learning that actually that's just the way that he's speaking. He's literally translating it from French to English. Yeah. And I think with the language barrier too is he might say something that I'm asking, can you clarify that? Can you just explain what you're meaning there?
Yeah.
And it is teaching so much patience, so much understanding. It's teaching not to assume, not to jump to conclusions, like all these things. Yeah,
exactly. I completely agree with you, and I feel like the language barrier, like you said, is both an obstacle, but as soon as you realize that it's really not, it brings you so much more, like you said, patience or asking to clarify and being more open about communication and be like, okay, I'm not understanding. This is how I'm feeling. Is that what you mean? And things like that. And so I completely understand when, you speak different languages.
Yeah.
And to me, even the way I talk to my friends in French, my own native language, the way I interact with my partner when I don't understand something he's saying, or when he doesn't understand something I'm saying, I can even bring it and use it with my friends as well. So I see what you mean with it's both complement each other.
Yeah.
The relationship with other people and your own relationship.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go on and start talking about your work at Women's Support.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so can you just describe the kind of work that you do here?
So we are an organisation in Motueka that work predominantly with family harm or family violence, working with women or anyone who identifies as a woman. But in saying that, we're also open to all women of the community. Yeah. So a lot of women are referred to us through something like the police or other organisations or even self-referrals. And we're there to just support, to counsel, and walk alongside where the woman's at and what's best for what she's wanting. Yeah.
That sounds good. And if I may ask you, on your work was, well, you said open to all women, obviously, but mainly was women victims, or do you also work with women who abuse themselves?
Well, I'd say predominantly with women who would be the victim of a family violence situation. But in saying that, we would work with both. Yeah. Only because it's more common.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. And in saying that, it's there's also the other way around, and when the man is the one that's giving the abuse. Yeah. Or when it's the woman that's getting the abuse, the man also is a victim of his own. Yeah.
No, fair enough.
Yeah. So it's a circle, but I guess predominantly because it's more common and more talked about and more brought forth, we're working with women. Yeah.
And what about the children? Is there services for the children as well? Or?
So we don't work directly with the children.
Yeah.
We had the Oranga Tamariki would be the ones that would be watching over the children. Yeah. However, as we're working with the women, we have the children in mind, and we have the children's safety in mind as well. Yeah.
So it's about it's a bit holistic, even though it's going through the woman.
Yeah. And there's another service that are working with the males. So we're in contact just to make sure what like you're saying, like the holistic approach around the whole whānau.
Yeah, so that's quite nice to consider everyone.
Yeah.
And so what are the most common issues that you would deal? Would it be something, for example, like family violence, like you said, or do you also see people, women victims of sexual violence, like randomized, if I can say it like this, like single abuse or things like that?
Yeah, so I would say predominantly it would be family violence that comes through. Yeah. However, pretty much, there's the statistic that 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted or abused sometime in their life. So a lot of the clients would have sexual abuse in their life. A lot of family violence might be historical, or it might be current.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it's so many other things that people come through, or the women come through, like, again, depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
COVID has really affected things too. Things are just, the stresses now at home with so much going on. Yeah,
definitely. And then do you guys only do counseling, or do you also do prevention or outreach, community outreach?
That's actually something, the community outreach is that we've got someone else that's contracted to us.
Okay.
And we're currently working on workshops that we can actually bring to the community. And this is, in a way, a prevention way of talking about when someone discloses. So if you were working in a health organization and someone disclosed to you, you might be the very first person that they've ever disclosed to. What do you do with that? And how do you work through that? So that's what the workshops are going to be. So that's a future project that hopefully won't be too far away.
Yeah.
But in our service at the moment, there's it's a crisis centre, so any woman can walk in a crisis situation, and we attend the crisis, the needs in that moments. We support through all sorts of things like doctor's appointments, WINS appointments, and then there's a counselling service.
Yeah. So again, it's holistic, but here in a different way. It's through every aspect of someone's life, because when you're a victim, it's not only it affects everything, really. It doesn't only affect your mental health, it also affects like how you function and your physical health, and then it makes it difficult to deal with administrative things and stuff like that. So I feel like you guys offer all around support. If I can say
right from the beginning to the long-term growth and change.
Because it can be quite tricky when someone first comes here, doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't really understand their own situation, because even though sometimes we feel something's wrong and we know it's wrong, but that doesn't mean we can deal with it, and so I think it's nice to have that support through every aspect of it, and sometimes we might forget about it.
There's we've seen it a lot, that there seems to be like 5 stages, and when the woman feels, I'm using woman because we work with women, when she's feeling that there's something going on that's not quite right in the relationship, and usually the first step is first acknowledging this, coming into the service and saying, how can I get him some help, seeking help for him? How can he manage his anger? Is there support system for him? What can I find for him to get support? And that's the first stage. The second stage is, okay, how can I'm like seeking help for, how can I work through this and deal with this? Is there things I can do that will help the relationship? Things like controlling her own emotions, even things like making sure that the house is tidy, the dinner's done, so that it's not setting off the anger episodes, or things that she can control and change that control the relationship.
And then if I can interrupt, I feel like sometimes one of the way to control that is to actually trigger the abuse, because once you're in that tension building phase, if it's triggered, then you're going to go down, and there is not that ever-present stress.
You're predicting when it would you're knowing when it's going to happen instead of waiting.
And you're controlling that event. So that was my question.
And then so those two first stages are focusing on the relationship. And then the third stage is, okay, seeking help for, how do I leave this relationship? And that's when, we come in with protection orders, emergency accommodation. We work sometimes with women's refuge, all of these steps to actually remove her from the relationship. And the fourth stage is, well, now how do I survive outside of this relationship? Like now maybe she has kids, maybe she's now working out her own financial situation. Where do I live? What support system do I have around me? And all of that. And then the fifth stage is, how do I thrive outside of this relationship? How do I use this relationship as something that I look back on, that I've grown from and learned from?
So it's kind of like making it part of your story in a way. Like it was something outside of you, but now you're kind of integrating it into your own story. And often we will see, women come in stage 1 and leave, and we don't see them again for months, sometimes a year. And then they come in and maybe they get to stage 3 and they leave the relationship, and then they go back again, and it goes back and forth. It's not always easy, and when we talk theory wise, it makes it sound like it's very, this step is going to last X days or X weeks, and and it's not, in reality, it's not like that.
And that's where our job is. We are just there with the client for whatever step she's in and where she's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so what do you find challenging in this job?
I think it's we're talking about a lot of pretty tough discussions.
Mm-hmm.
It brings some pretty heavy stories. There's a lot of abuse in people's pasts, and sometimes it can be quite hard when, going home and leaving that. And often, when the client does disappear or we can't get a hold of a client, and it's that unknown of what's happened.
Yeah.
What's going on. Also working with, women that have been through such traumatic experiences, and that trauma comes out in different ways of, maybe really elevated and talking a lot.
Yeah.
Highly emotional. And holding that space can be exhausting.
Yeah.
So I guess those are the things that can be quite heavy to learn to leave at work and go home and not take that energy.
Set boundaries. Not protect yourself, but at least know where you are and how it is affecting you in a way as well. Being aware of how it impacts your own mental health.
Yeah.
And what about the rewarding aspect of it? Like, what do you like about this job?
I think the most rewarding thing is seeing someone come through something and work like on their situation or on themselves and come out happier, come out growing into something that they wanted to be.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
Just see this person becoming her own person in a way.
Yeah,
no, definitely.
Yeah.
So I guess we're reaching the last question.
Okay.
Yeah, we're ready. I really like talking about this because it reminds me of a job that I did in the past, and we can talk about it after if you want.
Yeah.
But the last question is going to be a bit more personal, and that's something that I'd like to ask to everyone. Because that's a question I personally love asking. It's a bit selfish. But what makes you special?
Okay. What makes you special? That can be quite a hard question to ask, hey?
Yeah.
To answer about yourself. I believe that I am open-minded, and one, as a counsellor, you'd have no idea what's going to come through the door. You have no idea what is going to be said, and being so open-minded, non-judgmental, and I think in my own life too. I'm open to change, open to growth, open to be told when I'm not doing something right, open to experiences. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking part of this then with me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Aujourd'hui Psychology. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the episode, please give me little stars on your favorite listening platform and subscribe to be the first to listen to the next ones. You can also follow me on Instagram @Aujourd'hui Psychology and invite your friends to join us on this journey through psychology. If you have any comments, questions, or if you feel like participating in the podcast, feel free to send me a little message. See you soon for another journey.